Today's that tedious job that I have to do because I'm ready to start putting things in my garden, and so I have to separate all of these onion seeds out. And I have a bucket of leeks already started on, but I grew them in big clusters, so I've got to get all this pulled apart. Now, I find it easier to plant things in mass quantities in one little spot instead of like one seed per cell, because if I want to grow 60 leeks, I don't want to take up 60 cells, that's a big tray to take up space. Where instead I can just, like with onions, there's probably 100 in here. Look, it's 3 little cells on a tray. That's it. I'm hoping this helps you guys so that when you start to grow things from seed, you can do this too. It's really not a hard task at all. It's just a little tedious, things that you have to take your time with, but very, very beneficial. You get a lot of growth from this little spot. And these are just onion seeds that I saved from last year. I let my onions go to seed, and they were from the little, bulb starts that you buy at the store, unlabeled, just mixed colors. So most of these are going to be yellow and white. I did not get enough purple. I don't know why, but that's okay. I'll work on purples next year. But yeah, can you hear that wind? It is so windy today. That's why I'm in the greenhouse again. With things like the leeks, I just put handfuls into cell trays like this, and then to get them a little bit bigger, I just put them into a big bucket and let them grow a little bit. And now it's time to move them into the garden. So I want to show you what it is that I'm doing so that, like I said, maybe this helps you out. And when you start to grow from seed, you don't take up all that tiny space. Gosh, this wind blew my tomatoes over. I don't want to break the tomato plants. I just spent all the time sorting them and getting them ready so that I can start selling. And this one over here is even knocked over, and that's way down. Very windy day today. Very windy. Oh. So anyways, I hope this helps you guys out, because I really think that it's more easier to just garden this way, where you throw everything in big clusters and then separate it later instead of taking up all your space. So let me show you what I've got going on and show you how to do this so that if you want to do this too, you know how. Okay, so this is the bucket I was talking about. I planted all these leeks in there. There's quite a bit. I did have a big thing of grass growing too. I just pulled that out and no problem. It came apart from the roots. Not an issue at all. Holy cow, this wind needs to slow down. See, this is in my greenhouse and this stuff's going crazy. But I got an aluminum tray. I prefer to do it this way. I don't recommend putting these in the sun. I will take this after I have separated them all and put this into a black flower pot and take that out to the garden instead. But I've just got enough water in here. My table's a little angled, but I want to keep the roots wet down on this end, so I'm just going to swish it every once in a while. And all I'm doing is taking the leeks and piling them up in one side, and then I'll do the same thing after I put these in the garden with the onions on the other side, so I know where they are. But you want to keep these wet so they don't dry out, and do not put the greens under the water. You want to just put the roots and the bulbs in. So here's what I have, is this big bucket. And I've already dug out this big spot. What you want to do is you want to make sure you constantly tap this and shake out the dirt. The less dirt you have in there, the easier these roots are going to come apart. And you will lose roots. It happens, but these things are very forgiving. That's my favorite word when it comes to gardening. They're very forgiving. They're not going to get mad at you if they lose a couple roots. What I do is I work from the edges and move my way in. So I'm just going to slowly grab down towards the bulb itself. Now these are leeks, and I'm just going to slowly pull the leek out. And then I'll come over and set that into my tray. Find the next one. If you pull from the greens, you can actually break the greens off. I did that with one already. So it's probably not going to make it in the garden. If you lose a couple roots, like I said, that's no big deal. But you just want to come through and clean up all this dead stuff. You're going to have the little brown pieces that dry up on the top. Clean off as much of that as you can. And just grab from the base and pull. And it might take a couple good tugs, but you're eventually going to get them all separated. And just keep doing that. Some of them are going to come out easier. If they're not coming out in one direction, try in a different. Look at that. Bigger ones. And then eventually you get down to the last one and just pull those extra roots off because you don't need those going into the ground. Okay, so with the onions, because I did this in this larger cell, I want to come in and I want to separate each cell tray out so that I know this is the cluster I'm working with and I'm not pulling from the other one yet. These should pop out nicely. If not, squeeze the bottoms and that looks perfect. I've just got a big cluster of onions. And what I do, because I have my bucket, I'm just going to put the dirt back in here. I'm just going to gently start pushing and squeezing. I'm wanting to try to break up this root system and get much of this dirt off. And these were just watered, so it's really wet soil. If you let them dry out a little bit, it does help. So I'm just going to sit there and do that. And they're starting to break out already. So as I'm finding them, I can just pull them and put them into my pan. And again, just like with the leeks, work your way around. You'll see more exposed on one side than the other. Gently tug those out. Make sure they're all completely separated so you don't have to worry about that when you get in the garden. All you have to do is poke holes and stick them in the ground. Now, you will get some tangles here and there. If you lose a little bit of the green, it's not going to hurt them. They're going to start growing pretty quickly as soon as you get them out there. And just keep detangling and pulling away. And sometimes you might get a cluster like this one. I got 4 in this, so I'm just going to slowly tug those apart. Now I'm going to keep this pan in my actual greenhouse for now, and I'm going to move down what I'm planting at the time. Again, don't put these aluminum pans in the sun because they're going to get very hot. It's going to boil the water and it's going to kill the plants. You don't want that. You want to save your plants. That feels like an ant bite. Nope. You want to save your plants, so don't take these down to the garden like this. And so what I'll do is I'll put them into a pot, and I'll show you that in a second. I'm just going to do this last little cluster. And it's real easy. I mean, I've already pulled apart probably 20 onions, and you can see how long that actually took me. And so yeah, if you think about that, this is less work and less time than having to put one seed in every single cell and hope that I get the 60 onions that I want. Instead, I can just separate as easily like this and then take them all down there. So let me show you the next step. So I've got a black pot here. I do not recommend doing all of these at one time unless you're going to just stay out in the garden for an entire half hour to an hour planting directly. But what I do is I grab a handful. Not sure how many this is. Looks like it could be about a dozen. But I've got a dozen of them, and I'm just going to set them into my pot, and that time I'm going to take them down to my garden. If I take this down to the garden like this, they're not going to dry out as easily, and I have smaller batches to work with, and it really helps me kind of get them planted without killing the plants themselves. So I'll separate everything that's in here because my intentions today are to plant it all, and then I'll just put them into a pot, take this pot down, plant these, come back, get more, plant those, and keep moving. If you're going to take a ton of these down there at once, seriously make sure they have some water on them, or you have a bucket in hand with water or a watering can, because when you're down there in the garden and these roots start to dry out too much, you can just give them a little bit of a wash with some water, and that's going to get them a little bit more life into them so they don't dry out as quickly, and then you can get them all planted. But that's what I'm doing. I'm working on these today, and I'm going to get onions and leeks in the ground along with the rest of my tomatoes and making big giant messes. And like I said, it's not real hard. I actually prefer it this way. I've only grown onions and leeks from seed for the past few years. Before that, I've bought sets. Last year, I didn't even put seeds in the ground. I wanted to wait till I saved seeds to make sure that they actually grew, and they did. I have viable onion seeds just from some flowers that I let go in my garden. So I'll show you that because I have some onions up front blooming, and when they bloom, I'll show you what onion flowers look like and how to save seeds from those, because it's really quite simple. But I'm just going to keep doing this, get this all done, and then I'm going to go transplant all this out to the garden and then get these tomatoes put in, and I've got some cucumbers and bean seeds. And today's one of those days where it's just like back to back to back to back, getting everything put in the garden. So, exciting stuff. I love gardening. I'm sure you guys do too. That's why you watch the channel, because gardening is actually like one of the coolest things you can do. You're growing food. You're growing your groceries, and you're doing it from seed. majority of us, you know, from seed. And even if you come through and you purchase plants, still, you're growing your food from that instead of from a produce aisle in a grocery store, that sort of thing. All right, guys, well, I'm going to get to work, and I will see you in the next one.